In the stillness of the night, Moonbeam felt an unfamiliar pull within her soul, as if a distant, unseen force was calling her. She sat on her bed, staring into the moonlight that filtered through the curtains, her thoughts as restless as the shifting shadows. Her eyes narrowed, and the air seemed to thicken. Suddenly, her vision blurred, and a figure emerged from the depths of the dream. The princess, sleepwalking, wandered through a garden filled with iridescent flowers, lost and confused. As Moonbeam watched, the princess' eyes locked onto hers, a silent plea for help. Without thinking, Moonbeam reached out her hand. "I'll help you," she whispered into the still night. The words carried a weight far beyond her understanding, but she knew one thing for certain: the journey had already begun. The princess' fate was intertwined with hers, and she could not turn away. Moonbeam closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the words echo in her mind. The vow she had made to help the princess felt like a promise made to the universe itself. She could feel the energy in the air shift, as though the world around her had bent to the weight of her decision. The garden, though distant, seemed to be pulling her toward it, drawing her into its world of dreams and mysteries. A gust of wind rattled the window, as if nature itself was urging her forward. With a deep breath, Moonbeam stood up, her heart pounding with uncertainty, but also with resolve. "I'll find you," she whispered into the quiet night. The room, once a place of comfort, now felt like a distant memory. She grabbed her cloak, prepared to leave the only world she had known, and enter a new, uncharted one. Little did she know, the path ahead would change her forever. Moonbeam stepped out into the night, the cool air brushing against her skin as she made her way toward the garden. Her heart beat faster with each step, the uncertainty growing with every moment. The sky above was dotted with stars, but it felt like the heavens themselves were watching her, guiding her, urging her forward. As she crossed the threshold of the garden, the world around her seemed to shift. The air grew heavier, the shadows darker, and the garden's ethereal glow became more intense, casting strange reflections across the ground. She walked deeper into the garden, her senses heightened. The flowers seemed to whisper secrets as she passed, their luminous petals shimmering with a ghostly light. Then through the mist, she saw her, the princess, standing motionless, lost in a trance. Her form seemed both present and absent, as though she existed in two worlds at once. "I'm here," Moonbeam whispered, stepping closer. Moonbeam moved cautiously, as if treading in a world that wasn't fully her own. Every step seemed to echo in the stillness of the garden. The princess stood in the distance, her back turned to Moonbeam, yet Moonbeam felt a pull toward her, as though an invisible thread connected them. "You don't have to be lost anymore," Moonbeam said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The princess did not respond. Instead, she continued to stand, unmoving, as if she couldn't hear or see the world around her. But Moonbeam was not deterred. She closed the distance between them, every step deliberate, every movement purposeful. When she reached the princess, she gently placed a hand on her shoulder. The princess's body trembled at the touch, her eyes snapping open, wide with fear and confusion. She looked at Moonbeam, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came out. The princess's eyes searched Moonbeam's face, as if trying to understand who she was. Moonbeam knelt in front of her, looking directly into her eyes. "You're not alone," she said, her voice a steady anchor in the swirling chaos of the dream world. Slowly, the princess's gaze softened, but the sadness never left her eyes. She opened her mouth again, and this time, a word escaped her lips. "Help!" It was a single word, but it held so much weight. A tear fell from the princess's eye, and Moonbeam felt a surge of emotion she hadn't expected. "I will help you," Moonbeam promised, her voice filled with determination. The moment stretched, as if the entire garden held its breath. As the princess nodded slightly, the dream world around them seemed to pulse with a new energy. Moonbeam stood up, offering her hand. "Let's wake you up," she said. The princess took it, and in that instant, the connection between them solidified, their fates intertwined. The garden had transformed since Moonbeam's arrival. It now felt less like a dream, and more like a twisted labyrinth. Every step she took brought her deeper into its maze, and with each turn, the world around her seemed to change. The once soft glow of the flowers now cast eerie, unpredictable shadows, and the air was thick with an unexplainable weight. The princess walked beside her, but in a trance, her movements slow, as if her feet were tethered to the ground. Moonbeam's pulse quickened, the unsettling energy of the garden gnawing at her. She glanced at the princess, whose eyes seemed vacant, but deep down, Moonbeam knew that she was aware of something, some part of herself that was still conscious in this dreamscape. "We're getting closer, I can feel it," Moonbeam murmured, her words barely breaking the silence. "But what are we looking for?" The princess didn't answer. Her face locked in an expression of sorrow and confusion, leaving Moonbeam to face the unknown alone. The deeper they ventured into the garden, the more Moonbeam began to notice subtle changes. The flowers' light flickered as though they were alive, watching them with unseen eyes. The paths twisted unnaturally, leading them in circles, and Moonbeam felt the heavy weight of disorientation settling in. It was clear now that this garden was not just a place. It was a reflection of the princess's inner turmoil. Moonbeam glanced at the princess again, who seemed to be drawn towards a distant part of the garden. Her steps were unsteady, as if she were walking through a fog, unsure of where she was going. "What are we searching for?" Moonbeam whispered, as though the answer would come from the garden itself. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, and the sky darkened, casting an ominous shadow over them. The princess's head snapped towards the horizon, her eyes wide in sudden fear. Moonbeam's heart raced. Something was about to happen. Moonbeam felt a surge of urgency. The garden was no longer just a maze. It was becoming something alive, reacting to their presence. Every step they took felt like an echo in the fabric of the dream, reverberating with a deep, unsettling vibration. The princess moved farther ahead, her pace quickening as if guided by some invisible force. "Wait!" Moonbeam called out, but the princess didn't respond. Instead, she seemed to slip further into the fog, her figure growing faint as the shadows swallowed her whole. Panic surged through Moonbeam's chest as she ran after her, pushing past the thick mist that clung to the ground like tendrils. She stumbled, falling momentarily, but regained her footing. When she finally reached the princess, she saw the garden around them starting to warp, the trees twisting unnaturally, the ground rippling beneath them. The princess had stopped, frozen in place. Her eyes were wide with terror. "It's all collapsing," Moonbeam said, her voice trembling with realization. "We need to leave." Moonbeam's mind raced. She knew they couldn't stay in this distorted place much longer. The dream world was breaking apart, and if they didn't escape, they might become trapped forever. She grabbed the princess's hand, pulling her forward with all the strength she could muster. "Come on, we have to go." The princess's limp hand offered no resistance, but there was no reaction. "Please wake up," Moonbeam cried, shaking the princess's arm. Finally, the princess blinked, as if snapping out of her trance, and her gaze focused on Moonbeam with a flicker of recognition. "You're still here?" the princess whispered, her voice distant and weak. Moonbeam nodded, her heart pounding. "I'm not leaving you." The princess nodded. And for a brief moment, Moonbeam thought she saw the spark of life return in her eyes. Together they began to run through the crumbling garden, but the path seemed endless, as though the garden itself was playing tricks on them. The air felt heavier, and the garden's shifting shadows made it nearly impossible to see. Moonbeam's legs burned with exhaustion, but she refused to stop. The princess' hand, though weak, was still in hers, and the connection between them fueled her determination. The garden, once beautiful, now seemed like a nightmare, its distorted paths twisting in all directions. But Moonbeam could see something ahead, an opening, a glimpse of the real world beyond the dream. With one final burst of energy, they pushed through the last of the thick mist, and the garden gave way to the night sky. The air was fresh and cold, and the moonlight was calm, as though the dream world had exhaled in relief. They stood at the edge of a cliff, overlooking a vast, unknown world below. The princess collapsed to her knees, exhausted but alive. "We made it," Moonbeam said, her voice filled with both relief and exhaustion. "But why were we here?" Princess didn't answer immediately, staring out into the darkness. Slowly she turned to Moonbeam and whispered, "Because I was lost. And you found me." The air felt different now. As Moonbeam and the princess walked deeper into the world of dreams, something shifted. The chaos of the garden had given way to a quiet, still place. A long winding corridor, surrounded by ancient stone walls. Strange symbols, faded and worn with time, lined the passage. The princess, though still walking in a trance, seemed to slow as they reached the corridor. Moonbeam felt a presence, a heaviness in the air. The princess's footsteps faltered, and for the first time she looked up, her eyes meeting Moonbeam's. "I remember this place," she whispered, her voice distant yet familiar. Moonbeam's heart raced. This wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a memory. A memory buried deep within the princess' mind. "What is this place?" Moonbeam asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The princess paused, her expression unreadable. "It's where I was lost," she replied. And with those words the path ahead became clearer and more terrifying. The further they walked, the more Moonbeam felt the weight of the princess's memories pressing in. The walls of the corridor seemed to shift with each step, as if the passage itself was alive, breathing with the weight of history. The princess's face grew more pained with each step, her body stiffening as if the memories were too painful to bear. Suddenly, a door appeared ahead, carved from dark wood and framed in ornate silver. The princess stopped, staring at it as though it held the key to everything. "Behind that door lies the truth," she said softly, her voice trembling. Moonbeam's hand instinctively reached out for the handle, but the princess's hand stopped her. "Don't open it, not yet," she said, her eyes wide with terror. "I'm not ready." Moonbeam hesitated. "Then what do we do?" Princess's gaze softened and she stepped back. "We go back," she whispered. But Moonbeam knew they couldn't. Not now. Moonbeam could feel the tension in the air, thick and oppressive. The princess's fear was palpable, but so was her resolve. "What's behind that door, really?" Moonbeam asked, her voice filled with quiet urgency. The princess's eyes clouded with sorrow. "It's where I lost myself." Her voice cracked. "That's where I forgot everything, where the pain began." Moonbeam's heart ached at the sorrow in her words. The princess had been running from this moment for so long, burying her own pain in the depths of this dream world. The door was a physical manifestation of that suffering. "You don't have to run anymore," Moonbeam said, her voice filled with compassion. The princess turned to her, her expression softening for a moment, but then the shadows in her eyes deepened. "I've been lost for so long," she whispered. "I don't know if I can be found again." Moonbeam gently took her hand. "I'll help you," she said, her voice firm, even though doubt tugged at her heart. The princess finally let go of the door, her fingers loosening, but she didn't step away. She stood there, staring at the door as if it were the gateway to her past, a past she had been avoiding for so long. "The pain is still there," she whispered. "No matter how hard I try to run, it follows me." Moonbeam's heart broke as she realized how deeply the princess's grief ran. The princess had been trying to outrun herself for so long, and now, standing before the door, she was forced to confront it. Moonbeam stepped forward, placing her hand on the princess's shoulder. "You don't have to face it alone," she said softly. The princess turned to face her, her expression filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if opening that door destroys me?" Moonbeam's voice was steady. "Then we'll rebuild you," she said. "Together." The princess took a deep breath and turned back toward the door, her hand reaching for the handle. As she touched it, the air around them seemed to change. The corridor grew even darker, and a strange cold wind began to blow through the cracks in the walls. The princess hesitated but didn't pull away. Slowly, she turned the handle, the door creaking open with a sound that reverberated through the hall, like the cry of something ancient. Moonbeam stood behind her waiting, her heart pounding. As the door swung wide, the truth spilled out. The room beyond was dark, filled with shadows and memories of a long-forgotten time. The air was thick with sorrow. The princess stepped forward, and as she crossed the threshold her body trembled. "It's time to remember," she whispered. And in that moment, everything changed. The past that had been locked away for so long began to unravel, and the truth of the princess's lost memory began to surface. As the princess stepped fully into the shadowy room, the air around her seemed to shift, growing denser with every breath. Moonbeam stood just inside the doorway, watching, her heart heavy with the realization that the moment had come. The room was eerily still, save for the soft whispers that seemed to echo from the dark corners. The walls themselves seemed alive, pulsing with energy, reflecting the inner turmoil of the princess's mind. The memories, no, the illusions, of her past were weaving themselves into the very fabric of the space, dancing on the edges of Moonbeam's consciousness. She stepped forward, but before she could reach the princess, the floor beneath them trembled, and a wave of cold rushed through the room, distorting the shadows. A voice, low and twisted, whispered from the dark corners. "This is not the truth you seek," it hissed. Moonbeam's pulse quickened as she realized that not all was as it seemed. The illusions were trying to stop them. The princess turned, her face a mixture of fear and confusion. "I can't tell what's real anymore," she whispered, her voice trembling. The shadows around them grew, twisting into figures of the past, distorted and unrecognizable. Moonbeam felt the weight of the illusion press in on her, the walls closing in. She reached out to the princess, but the darkness between them seemed to thicken with each step she took. "You have to face it," Moonbeam urged, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "These are just shadows. They cannot hurt you unless you believe them." The princess' eyes filled with tears as the shadows around her grew louder, whispering lies and half-truth. "What if I don't want to remember?" the princess cried. "What if it's too painful?" Moonbeam's hand found hers, squeezing it with unwavering resolve. "The pain won't go away until you face it. You're stronger than this." With a deep breath, the princess closed her eyes and took a step forward. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, but she pressed on, her body trembling. As she moved, the shadows began to retreat, but only slightly. Each step she took felt like an eternity. Moonbeam stayed by her side, watching as the princess faced her fears head-on. The illusions fought back, warping into painful memories of loss, betrayal, and regret. The room seemed to pulse with the princess's emotions, the walls reacting to her every move. Then, suddenly, the princess stumbled, her legs buckling beneath her. The shadows twisted around her, threatening to pull her into the darkness. Moonbeam caught her just in time, holding her steady. "You don't have to do this alone," Moonbeam whispered. The princess clung to her, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so scared," she confessed, her voice breaking. Moonbeam held her tighter. "I'm right here. We'll face it together." The princess clung to Moonbeam, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The shadows continued to twist, but now they seemed less threatening, more like distorted memories trying to hold her in place. Slowly, the princess's grip on Moonbeam loosened, and she took another step forward. "I can't stay in this darkness anymore," she whispered, her voice steady now. The shadows shuddered as though resisting her movement. Moonbeam stayed close, watching as the princess finally faced the heart of the room. A single beam of light pierced through the darkness, illuminating an object in the center. A mirror, cracked but still intact. "It's time to face yourself," Moonbeam said gently. The princess turned toward the mirror, her face a mixture of fear and determination. As she stepped closer, the reflection staring back at her began to shift, showing a fractured version of herself, broken and lost. "I don't recognize her," the princess whispered. The princess stared at her reflection, her heart pounding as the fractured image of herself began to shift and twist. "I've always been afraid of what I might see," she whispered, her voice shaky. "What if the person I see in the mirror is beyond saving?" The shadows in the room swirled, responding to her fear, But Moonbeam stepped closer. "The truth is not your enemy," she said softly. "What's in that mirror is just a part of you. It's the part you've been running from. But it's not too late to heal." The princess' breath hitched, and for a long moment she stood frozen, staring at her own reflection. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched the glass. The moment her fingers made contact, the mirror shattered, and the shadows dissipated, vanishing into the air. The room brightened, and the princess looked up at Moonbeam, her eyes filled with relief and quiet strength. "I see her now," the princess said, her voice clear and calm. "I can heal." The air was still, almost heavy with anticipation, as the princess stood in the quiet room, the shattered pieces of the mirror scattered across the floor like remnants of a broken past. She was different now, lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted. The shadows that once clung to her every step had faded, leaving her in the soft light of the moment. Moonbeam stood beside her, silently watching, knowing that the hardest part was not over, but just beginning. "It's strange," the princess said, her voice quiet but steady. "For so long I was afraid to see what was inside of me. I thought I would break under the weight of it all." Moonbeam nodded, her gaze gentle. "But you're still here, stronger than before." The princess looked down at the shards of glass at her feet, each one a reflection of the pain she had carried. "I have to let go of all of this," she said softly. "I have to set it free." Moonbeam smiled, stepping closer. "And you will, one piece at a time." The princess knelt down, her hands trembling as she carefully picked up one of the shards from the floor. She held it in her palm for a moment, staring into the jagged reflection. It was a part of her past, a part that she had been afraid to face for so long. But now, looking at it, she saw not just pain but strength, a strength she had always possessed, even when she hadn't known it. "This shard," she whispered, "was where I broke, where I thought I lost myself." Moonbeam crouched beside her, her voice steady. "But it's just a piece of the whole. You're not broken." The princess looked at Moonbeam, her expression softening. "How do I let go of it?" she asked. Moonbeam placed her hand gently on hers, guiding her. "You don't have to force it. Let it be what it is, a memory, not a chain." Slowly, the princess opened her hand and let the shard fall, watching as it slid across the floor. The act was simple, yet powerful. And in that moment, she knew she had taken the first step to freedom. As the last shard fell, the room grew quieter, as if the very space around them had exhaled a long-held breath. The princess stood slowly, her eyes lifting to the door at the far end of the room. It had been there the whole time, but she had never noticed it until now. A symbol of the way forward, the way out of the darkness. "Is it time?" she asked, her voice tinged with both hope and fear. Moonbeam nodded, her eyes full of compassion. "It's time to leave the past behind, but it's also time to step into the future." The princess walked toward the door, her steps sure now, no longer weighed down by the memories that had once shackled her. She reached for the handle, her hand steady. The door creaked open, revealing a soft, glowing light beyond. It was not an end, but a beginning. A new chapter of her life was waiting, one where she could be free of the shadows that had haunted her for so long. The door opened, and the light flooded into the room, bathing everything in its soft, warm glow. The princess stepped forward, her breath steady now, the weight of her past no longer a burden. Moonbeam followed, closing the door behind them with a finality that felt right. They stood together, looking out into the new world that awaited them. The landscape beyond was vast, stretching out beneath a brilliant sky, but it was not intimidating. It was inviting, promising the chance for healing and peace. "I never imagined it could feel like this," the princess whispered, her voice a mix of awe and relief. "Free." Moonbeam smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "You've always been free, you just needed to see it." The princess turned to Moonbeam, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for helping me find my way." Moonbeam nodded, her expression soft but firm. "You found it all on your own. I was just here to remind you." As the two stood there, The sun began to rise, casting a golden light across the landscape. The world felt new, untouched, full of potential. For the first time, the princess felt the full weight of the peace she had been yearning for. It wasn't a peace of forgetting, but of acceptance. She turned to Moonbeam, her heart open, her soul light. "I think I finally understand," she said, her voice strong now, filled with a quiet joy. "It's not about erasing the past or running from it. It's about accepting it, letting it be a part of me, and then choosing to move forward." Moonbeam smiled, her eyes reflecting the sunrise. "Exactly. The past doesn't define you. What matters now is what you choose to become." The princess nodded, a sense of calm settling over her. Together, they walked forward into the light, leaving behind the darkness, ready to face whatever came next. They were free, and that was enough. The sun had fully risen now, casting a soft golden glow over the world, yet Moonbeam and the princess knew they were not out of the woods just yet. Their journey had led them here to this serene moment, but something deeper still awaited them. A final test, perhaps, the one that would determine if they could truly leave the past behind and embrace the peace they had fought so hard for. Moonbeam felt the shift in the air, the subtle change in energy. Something lingered, a shadow in the light. The princess looked at her, her face now calm but with a quiet uncertainty. "What if I'm not truly ready?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with the weight of the question. Moonbeam reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've already taken the hardest step. This trial isn't about being ready. It's about facing the fear that holds you back." The princess nodded slowly, her gaze steady as she looked toward the horizon. "Then let's face it together," she said, her voice firm. They began walking again, the path before them open and clear. Yet, as they ventured deeper, the landscape seemed to shift once more. The soft breeze turned cold, and the bright sun was dimmed by dark clouds that appeared out of nowhere. The path before them narrowed, and the once peaceful surroundings now felt confining. "This isn't what it was," the princess murmured, her voice trembling. The ground beneath them began to tremble as though the earth itself was reacting to their presence. Moonbeam looked around, her heart racing as the ominous shift became impossible to ignore. "This is the final trial," she said, her voice steady despite the growing unease. "It's not the world that's changing. It's your inner strength being tested. You need to face the part of yourself that still fears what lies ahead." The princess looked down, her hands clenched at her sides. "But what if I fail?" she whispered. Moonbeam's gaze softened. "Failure is part of the journey. It's how you rise that matters." As they continued along the path, a figure appeared ahead, a silhouette against the stormy sky. The shape was familiar, yet distorted. The princess froze, her heart pounding. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. I thought I had let you go." The figure came closer, revealing itself to be an image of the princess from her past, one she had tried to leave behind. A younger version of herself, filled with pain and regret, walked slowly toward them. "I never left," the figure said, her voice a haunting echo. "You still carry me with you." The princess stepped back, her breath quickening. "I can't face this again," she said, her voice full of fear. Moonbeam stepped in front of her, her face resolute. "You don't have to. It's not about erasing your past, but accepting it. Only then can you move forward." The princess looked at Moonbeam, her heart aching, but the light of understanding began to shine in her eyes. The figure stood still, watching them both. For a long moment, the princess and her past self were locked in a silent confrontation. The pain of everything the figure represented seemed to crush the princess, making it harder to breathe. "I can't do this," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I can't let go of all of it." But as she spoke those words, Moonbeam placed her hand on the princess' arm, offering her strength. "You don't have to do it alone. We do this together." Slowly, the princess raised her head, her eyes filled with a new sense of determination. She faced the figure from her past, no longer with fear, but with acceptance. "You were a part of me, but you don't define me," she said, her voice steady. I am who I am today because of everything I've been through, and now I choose to let go of the pain." As the words left her mouth, the figure of her past self began to fade, dissolving into the wind, leaving the princess standing tall and whole. With the figure gone, the storm began to dissipate, and the sun broke through the clouds, bathing the path ahead in warm light. The air felt different now, clearer, purer. The princess exhaled deeply, as if letting go of a weight she had carried for lifetimes. "I did it," she whispered, almost in disbelief. Moonbeam smiled, her eyes filled with pride. "You've always been capable of this, you just needed to see it for yourself." The princess looked out at the horizon, the weight of the past lifting from her shoulders. "I feel free," she said, her voice full of awe and gratitude. "Like I can finally breathe." Together they walked forward, the path now wide and clear before them. There was no more fear, no more hesitation, only the promise of a future they would face side by side. As they walked into the light, the princess understood that this was her moment of true freedom, not from the world around her, but from the chains she had placed on herself. The morning light bathed the world around them in a soft, golden glow. The princess and Moonbeam walked side by side, their footsteps in perfect harmony. The path ahead was clear, wide open, and free from the dark clouds of the past. There was no more fear, no more uncertainty. The princess had faced her deepest fears, and now, standing in the light, she finally felt at peace. As they reached the top of a hill, the princess paused, taking a deep breath and looking out at the horizon. "I never thought I would feel this calm," she said, her voice filled with awe. "It's as if everything I've been through has brought me to this moment." Moonbeam smiled, her gaze warm. "You're here because you chose to heal, you chose to let go." The princess nodded, her heart light. "I think I'm finally ready to accept all that I am, both the light and the dark." She looked at Moonbeam, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for being here with me." The journey had taken them far, and though there were many obstacles along the way, the princess now understood that every trial, every step of the path, had been necessary for her growth. She turned to Moonbeam, her heart filled with both gratitude and realization. "I used to think that I had to fight my past, that I had to erase the parts of me I didn't like, but now I see that those parts are what shaped me into who I am today. Without them I wouldn't be standing here." Moonbeam nodded, her expression knowing. "The past is part of you, but it doesn't define you. It's how you respond to it, how you choose to heal that matters." The princess smiled, her heart swelling with understanding. "I've spent so much time fighting, but now I can finally let go and embrace who I truly am." The air around them seemed to hum with a quiet peace, as if the very world was reflecting their newfound clarity. As they continued walking, the princess felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not only for the journey she had undertaken, but for the companion who had never left her side. "I've learned so much," the princess said, her voice full of warmth. "But most of all, I've learned that I don't have to do it alone." Moonbeam smiled, her heart light. "You never were alone, you just needed to remember that." The princess looked out at the world around her, the bright blue sky stretching above, and the rolling hills below. "I've been so focused on the past that I forgot to live in the present," she said, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "But now, I can see everything clearly, like a weight has been lifted from my soul." Moonbeam gently placed a hand on the princess's shoulder, feeling the shift in energy. "This is only the beginning. You found your strength, and now you get to choose how to move forward." As they reached the edge of a forest, the princess turned to face Moonbeam, her eyes filled with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly, her voice thick with gratitude. "You've been by my side through everything, through all the dark moments, all the uncertainty." Moonbeam smiled gently. "I was just helping you remember what you already knew. You've always had the power to heal within you." The princess shook her head, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "But without you, I don't know if I could have found my way." Moonbeam placed a hand on her heart, her smile soft but knowing. "You found your way, not because of me, but because you chose to walk it. You chose to heal." The princess stood tall, her face a picture of quiet strength. Then let's walk the rest of this journey together, she said, her voice steady. I'm ready. Together, they walked into the forest, the trees above creating a canopy of green and gold. The world felt alive with possibility. The princess had finally come to accept all parts of herself, the broken, the whole, the dark and the light, and in doing so, she had unlocked her true strength. She was no longer running from her past or trying to escape her fears. She was standing in her truth, and that truth was enough. As they walked deeper into the forest, the princess looked around, her heart light. This is the life I want to live, she said, her voice steady and full of purpose. One where I'm free, not just from the past, but free to be myself. Moonbeam nodded, her gaze warm. This is your journey. I'll always be here, but this is your path to walk. The princess smiled, her heart filled with peace. Then let's walk it together.